So I have a guest on the show this evening, Kyra. She doesn't want to be here, but didn't want to say no. I've said before in videos I wanted to discuss the sociopathy thing and its relevance to Trudeau and the global elitists and all this.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've bounced off the subject of sociopathy before on occasion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've suggested that everyone should read the book The Sociopath Next Door by the brilliant, yes.
Yeah.
Martha Stroud. Should be mandatory reading. Now, here's an example, and I'm sorry I'm going to dominate the monologue for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I was talking to a guy on the tractor tour out there. You know, he didn't want to be filmed or anything. He looked at my little sheet. You've seen it before.
The little written one.
Yeah, the pamphlet, I call it, that I take. And he's going, yeah, well, okay, most of that looks true. And he says, well, I voted for Trudeau the first time, but not since. I think he's making a lot of mistakes and he's kind of in over his head. And I said, well, he's a sociopath. He goes, well, no, I don't think so. I said, well, he doesn't have the best interests of the people or the country at heart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's got 4 children. He must, And I'm trying to explain what a sociopath is to him. They don't love anybody. They're only driven by their own bizarre compulsions, right? Which we won't get into at length here. But I'm trying to explain to the guy all these global elitists they're all sociopaths. They have no empathy, as we were discussing at the kitchen table with your non-empathetic friend, right? I said, narcissism, narcissist. You hear the term all the time with Trudeau. That's one of the symptoms of sociopathy, right? And Dr. Robert Hare from, he was in the West Coast, UBC and Simon Fraser University.
Okay.
Robert Hare, H-A-R-E.
Vaguely familiar.
Yeah, well, one of the world-renowned studiers of sociopathy.
Okay.
Now, the term sociopathy and psychopathy are largely interchangeable.
Okay.
When you say psychopath, you tend to think psycho killers, Friday the 13th,
Like a little more unhinged.
Yeah. But really, the terms are largely interchangeable. The psychologists kind of nitpick that, but for all intent and purpose, it's the same. Now, an interesting thing about the people who've studied sociopathy. Now, let me step back a minute. Do you know what the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist is?
Psychologist primarily focuses on the brain, and a psychiatrist is like a psychologist who became a therapist.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
I used to have one, so.
Oh, well, I had to look it up.
Okay.
To get to my way of thinking, the psychologist studies.
It's more of a medical approach.
Yeah, well, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, this type of thing. The psychiatrist tries to fix it.
Yeah.
Often by giving you medication. This is a good idea. Your brain chemistry is a little awry, so we'll throw some,
See if this does the trick.
Yeah. Give you some antidepressants, and now your anxiety, But anyways, one of the interesting things, the psychologists who studied sociopathy, they all start out with really great intentions.
Yeah.
And they all come to the same conclusion at the end, which is send them out on a one-way hunting trip.
Okay.
Yeah. The Danes,
wow.
The Danish people were leaders in the study of sociopathy going back, 30, 40 years. And I read a book that was published, and it was all psychologists writing about their experiences with sociopathy. And they're writing for each other, so it's a tough read. They want to impress each other, big words and big sentences, But in the end, they all quote what they call primitive societies. They refer to them as
It's your type 1, 2, 3s, and 4s?
no primitive societies like some of them still in South America and in deepest Africa, and they often quote what they call the Eskimos or the Inuit.
Okay.
I
Why?
I don't well because the Eskimos, they don't like being called that, I don't think, but I don't want to offend anyone. I don't think they necessarily like being called Inuits either, but whatever. They don't want to say it themselves, so they quote these primitive societies, and again, often the Inuit, and they say they have a word that means sociopath, they have a word that means incorrigible,
Mm-hmm.
and they have another word that means push them out on an ice floe.
Let me guess, they're all the same word?
No,
Oh.
no. They have a word that means sociopath. They have a
Okay.
word that means the sociopath is incorrigible,
Mm-hmm.
can't be fixed, can't be corrected. And they have another word that means take them out on an ice floe and let a polar bear eat them or take them on a one-way hunting trip.
Mm-hmm.
They're not fixable.
Yeah.
I think our society will come to a point in time, should our society survive, where we first like put them in colonies like we did lepers.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we become more comfortable with testing them and saying, well, that's definitely a sociopath.
The
No.
thing is, the colonies they're in now are the government.
Oh, well, very much so. Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I get what you're saying, where it's like they're going to say, well, there's a way around this.
Mm-hmm.
And do something about this. And then they're going to come to the same agreement that all the psychologists had.
Yeah.
Who have equipment and material and research and resources.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. They all come to the same conclusion.
It really
These
is.
people aren't human beings.
It's
They don't know
strange.
love, no empathy, no sympathy, no, just their compulsions.
Mm-hmm.
Bizarre compulsions.
It probably makes it a lot easier that there's millions of us. It's not like his kids, he'll go, okay, I understand why I have to care for this kid and this kid and this. But then it's like all of Canada. And it's like, you don't know, he doesn't know who I am. He may or may not know who you are.
Yeah.
But it if you don't know everybody, it's just the people, the country, the population, and it makes it so much easier to be that much more removed from it, even more so than he was before.
Mm. Yeah. Well, to go back to Robert Hare, the Canadian government in the penal system, the correctional system, asked him to devise a test for sociopathy. And he did. You had these 44-point criteria.
Okay.
And what degree of a sociopath are you?
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, the Canadian government or correctional services didn't utilize it. The States does.
Oh.
Right? So, but the convicts quickly learned not to participate in the study because when they come up on parole,
And this is now a fact.
well, the parole board goes, well, you scored 34 out of 44, dude. I don't know if we should turn you loose again, right?
Yeah.
But this poor fellow on the side of the road I'm talking to just couldn't get his head around that Trudeau can have any malintent towards the populace. Well, he has kids. Well, A, they're going to be raised guarded by a silver spoon as he was, and B, he doesn't really care anyways. They're pawns in his game. He cares no more or less for his own children than what he does you. You care for his children more because you're a human being.
Yeah.
And that's what these global elitists are.
It's like the opposite, how he can't empathize with us. We're over empathizing with him. Where it's like they can't wrap their head around somebody who wouldn't love their kids or wouldn't care about these things. Mm-hmm. It goes both ways.
Yeah, well, it's so hard for us as human beings to grasp just how non-human these entities really are. And that's why we fall victim to them so readily. Our inherent faith in human nature. I mean, any of the times in life, I'll use the term burnt, you've been burnt, you look back, you go, what was my mistake there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I trusted that individual. Inherently, we want to trust.
Mm-hmm.
And they just prey upon that.
Mm-hmm.
And they study us. No, they do. They,
Us?
well, normal people, yeah. The sociopaths.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Because they figure out, okay, where can I get in? How can I
yeah,
do what I want to do and manipulate them? What's their weakness? And
yeah.
yeah.
You might see them in a social setting, though, kind of be the last one to laugh because they didn't really get
Mm-hmm.
the human spontaneity of the humor, and their laugh is kind of always the same because they're mimicking our human behavior.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of scary when you put it like that.
Well, it is scary. It really is. The more you research it
Mm-hmm.
and look into what these sociopaths are, but our society rewards them in essence.
Because they can use everything to their advantage.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of politicians, powerful people, um, ruthless corporate businessmen are,
Mm-hmm.
applauded and rewarded for their ruthlessness.
Yeah, just take what they want.
Yeah, they don't care whose career or life or livelihood they trample over
Mm-hmm.
to get to the top of the corporate ladder, and we reward them with it.
Mm-hmm.
Another fascinating thing is what they call the breakdown of the nuclear family.
I don't know this one.
Oh, well, there's an infinite argument. It's not so much an argument anymore as it I can never remember the proper terminology. Is it your genetics or your environment?
Oh, nature versus nurture.
That's it.
Yes.
Thank you. And it's proven that it is both.
Mm-hmm.
But someone who doesn't necessarily isn't inherently a sociopath through deprivation of love and a confusing environment and stuff can develop sociopathic tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
And without a strong male presence and a stable family,
Mm-hmm.
the male animal tends to get a little confused in the head and become sociopathic.
It makes sense.
Mm.
It's like with anybody who's gone through trauma, you get this idea, and that becomes a fact, and that then dictates your reality, whether for better or for worse. Whether it's working around people's emotions to not cause trouble, or working around them to realize how you can get what you want, or avoiding these things because this typically happens, or doing certain things because it always give you a reward. So I
Yes.
can see how enough of one or the other would
Mm-hmm.
build somebody into that.
Yeah, kind of mutates your inherent
Mm-hmm.
natural way of thinking. And I'm 20 years behind following the studies, but what the Danes had found, and again, I'm probably quoting 20 or 30-year-old research, about 4% of the population is sociopathic.
Globally?
Yeah, sort of just by nature, so to speak.
Okay.
But they figure that that number was escalating at a huge rate with the breakdown of the nuclear family, so to speak. A stable environment doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily have to be a heterosexual couple with mommy and daddy. It could be grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But if you're raised in a bounced around from foster homes and nobody
Yeah.
really cares about you, and
Mm-hmm.
as you were just saying, you learn to be rewarded by the wrong things
Yeah.
and punished for the right.
Okay.
And in summation, perhaps this video is dragging on.
It's
Um,
a good conversation. I'm invested.
well, again, I'm dominating with a monologue, but at the end of the Second World War, I think it was in Ukraine, they had these foster homes for children, who were orphaned by the war.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them babies, very young children, and they just put them in this big gross institution where like they got plucked out of the crib twice a day to get changed. They were never hugged. They were just like treated like farm animals, like
Mm-hmm.
factory farm animals. And at the end of the Second World War, some well-intended people had the notion, well, they'd take these children who were now, 10, 12, 14 years old and stuff, and they'd ship them to Canada and place them with people. Well, they'd been raised in the most emotionally deprivative environment, almost inconceivable.
Yeah.
And they were animals, man. The people who took these in, well intended, I mean, they shipped them all back and they probably spent the rest of their life institutionalized. They were beyond any redemption. I mean, imagine being, almost from the womb through your formative teenage years, never having a hug or, like, I mean, they were just so far gone.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, well, it's a very extreme example of the breakdown of the nuclear family, the deprivation of love and reward and all the things we consider normal.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at somebody like Trudeau, do you think his crazy mom and his sociopathic dad ever really, he's bounced around by nannies who probably wanted nothing
they came from money, so...
Yeah, nannies who probably hated his spoiled little silver spoon arse.
Mm-hmm. Gosh.
So.
Yeah, I can see it, and I feel like when you come for money, you get everything you want. It also invokes a sense of privilege. Like, you go to school and you go, my mom got me this. My dad bought me a horse. I got this car. And you're like, this makes you feel better. This person doesn't have it. This person doesn't this. And you feel like this power. And so coming from money, having been raised probably primarily by nannies, it just kind of was like this. His dad was all up in everything. And it's like you just have this entitlement and privilege. And you've been so far removed from the life of the common folk,
mm-hmm.
the normal people, that it's not even conceivable.
The brilliant Jordan Peterson, I was watching one of his clips recently, he said, can be seen in a university or a college or high school parking lot. The rich kid's got the fancy car, and he thinks that makes him better, smarter, and more privileged than the kid who bought a used junker working, delivering pizzas and cutting grass.
Actually earned it.
Yeah, but the privileged child actually literally does think he's superior in every sense with daddy's money.
Yeah.
So that there's your silver spoon global elitist.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, they just actually believe it to be so.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's just built upon itself.
Well,
so he's gotten where he is now.
Yeah, with I don't see how he earned any of it at all, right? Privilege and a nice haircut.
Some people might say otherwise. I'm not on that spectrum.
What, you don't like his hair?
No.
Oh.
Mm-mm.
Well, I guess he's a bit old for you, but...
When he got elected, he was like, okay, I understand it. But no, it didn't stick.
No, well, he got in on the youth vote legalizing pot. He was a self-proclaimed feminist, which, how can you support Islam and be a feminist? I don't know. But, I mean, a fresh young politician and...
Yeah, that's probably... Yeah,
openness and transparency in government. Whoa!
Who said those words?
Oh, man.
Where did those come from?
Oh, wow. I guess we got through sociopathy. Anything you'd like to summate with?
No. But I understand it now.
Oh.
And yeah, we're good.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Kyra.
Of course. Thank you.